In 2021, Britain's most powerful warship sailed into the Pacific. It was supposed to prove something, that after Brexit, Britain was back, a global power again. Except 10 of the 18 fighter jets on board were American. The escort included a US destroyer and a Dutch frigate. It was the most expensive symbol in the Royal Navy, and it couldn't fill itself. After the Brexit vote in 2016, the Conservative government needed a story. Not just a policy, a story. Something that answered the obvious question. If not Europe, then what? The answer was called Global Britain. A post-imperial power reborn as a technological and commercial force, tilting towards the Indo-Pacific, reshaping trade on its own terms, and backing it all up with a military that could project hard power anywhere on the Earth. The plan had 4 pillars: technological leadership, a defense build-up, new global trade deals, and a strategic return to the Pacific. On paper, it was coherent, even ambitious. The government pledged an extra £24 billion for defense, new carrier groups, new free trade agreements from India to the Pacific, a new Britain, unchained from Brussels. What actually happened? The economy didn't boom, it contracted. The military was rebuilt on paper while hollowing out in practice, and the domestic foundation the whole project rested on, the United Kingdom itself, started to crack. This is the story of how a project designed to restore Britain as a global power may end up doing the opposite.
The Suez Moment.
To understand global Britain, you have to understand one moment: Suez, 1956. Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain, acting on imperial instinct, launched a military intervention, which was immediately stopped by the United States, which threatened to crash the pound. Britain backed down, in public, within days. It was the moment the empire ended. Not with a war, but with a phone call from Washington. That humiliation left 2 deep marks on British strategic culture. First, an almost unconditional commitment to never act against American interests again. Second, and this is the corrosive one, a compulsive need to perform global power, even as the actual capacity for it shrank. Every decade or so, a new grand project emerges. Global Britain is the latest version. Strategists have a useful framework for this: ends, ways, and means. Your goals, your methods, and your resources. They have to be in balance. If your goals are imperial but your means are shrinking, the whole structure collapses. That's been Britain's condition for decades, and global Britain made it worse, not better. Take the military, which was supposed to be the sharpest instrument of this renewed ambition. The Queen Elizabeth Carrier Group is the headline asset, £6 billion, state-of-the-art. But that deployment in 2021 told the real story. Britain couldn't crew its own strike group. The Navy faces a chronic shortage of frigates and destroyers. By the end of 2025, it will have just 7 frigates operational. And HMS Lancaster, which has been deployed in the Middle East, is being scrapped, with no replacement. For the first time in 45 years, Britain will have no major surface combatants in the region. The army is at 73,000 troops, the lowest since the Napoleonic Wars. Parliament's own Defence Committee has warned it would exhaust its combat capability within months in a high-intensity conflict. A significant part of why conventional forces are this depleted comes down to one budget decision: nuclear weapons. This year, nuclear spending absorbed 18% of the defence budget, and that share is rising as Britain builds 4 new Dreadnought-class submarines at a projected cost of over £31 billion. Every pound going to Dreadnought is a pound not going to frigates, to ammunition stocks, to the actual tools of the global role being claimed. One former defence chief put it plainly: Britain risks becoming Belgium with nukes. But that's not even the most alarming part.
Global Britain or Little England?
The economic logic of global Britain was equally brittle. Brexit was supposed to unlock a trade renaissance, new deals, new markets freed from EU constraints. The government's own fiscal watchdog now projects Brexit will reduce Britain's trade flows by 15% and cut GDP by around 4% in the long run compared to staying in. The new trade agreements meant to compensate have produced figures that are hard to take seriously. Joining the Trans-Pacific CPTPP trade bloc is projected to add 0.08% to GDP over 15 years. The India Free Trade Deal, 0.13% by 2040. These are government forecasts. The economic engine that was supposed to power global Britain was running on empty before the project even started. All of this translates into real-time data. In mid-April, the IMF handed Britain the largest growth downgrade of any G7 nation with a GDP forecast of just 0.8% for 2026. Inflation is heading towards 4%. Unemployment is expected to reach 5.6%, and living standards growth is predicted to be the lowest in the G7. Britain was already struggling before the latest shocks hit. What makes all of this more than just a story about overreach is where it ends up domestically. Britain gave Scottish nationalists their strongest argument in a generation. In 2016, 62% of Scots voted to remain in the EU. They were taken out anyway. Support for independence now sits somewhere between 45% and 55%, and the demographic trend favours separation. That alone would be significant, but here's the detail that cuts the deepest. Britain's entire nuclear arsenal is based at Faslane, in Scotland. An independent Scotland would almost certainly demand its removal, which means Britain could lose not just a country, but its nuclear status, and with it, its permanent seat on the UN Security Council. The project, designed to announce Britain as a global power, could end with Britain losing the last formal institutional marker it has left. This is what Suez Syndrome ultimately costs. Not prestige, not a few frigates, not a percentage point of GDP. The flight from realism. The refusal to match ambitions to actual capacity. And that has consequences that compound over time. In 1962, American Secretary of State Dean Axon put it with uncomfortable precision. Great Britain has lost an empire and has not yet found a role. Brexit was supposed to finally answer that. 60 years on, a historic vote, a new doctrine, billions spent on carriers and nuclear submarines, and Britain is still circling the same question. It hasn't found a role, it's been performing one. Britain has been running this same cycle for nearly 70 years. The question now isn't whether global Britain succeeded or failed, it's whether the political class has the appetite to ask something harder. What kind of power can Britain actually be with the resources it actually has in the world as it actually is? That question remains open.
Thank you for watching. If you would like to go deeper, check out our long-form channel.